Hello, hello, good evening. It's Monica from Life is Art, and this is the Saturday 5 p.m. demo at the December in Lapland online crop, and we are going to be looking at squashing and embossing. And you might think that those are the same things, but they have different meanings sometimes. So that's what we're going to be doing today. If you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. If you're watching out later on replay, you can say replay. And our video is still slightly squashed horizontally. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the video, that everything's just a little bit squashed. But we're going to be squashing today in the video, so I guess it all works out. We're going to be using one of the paper collections from the annual catalog called Full of Life. We're also going to be using an online exclusive item, which is the Modern Herringbone 3D embossing folder. We're also going to be using a couple of stamp sets. We're going to be using the Regal Flora, and that was in the September to December mini catalog. We're also going to be using the Sharing, Loving, Crafting stamp set. Now, this particular stamp set is sort of geared towards Stampin' Up! Demonstrators, but I do like some of the sentiments and things on here. And I believe anybody can purchase this. So we have Sharing What I Love, Loving What I Do, Crafted with You in Mind. There's a couple things about Stampin' Up! Happiness Inside, Handcrafted By, and Just to Brighten Your Day. And I think those work for just about any crafter. So we're going to be using those two stamp sets. And we're also using the Stylish Shapes dies, because you know me, I love those dies. We're using them over and over and over again. Alrighty, let's get started. Oh, I see Heather is watching. Good evening, Heather, and Laura's here too. Hooray, hooray. Let's get started with, how about a bit of stamping? We like our stamping, don't we? So we're going to start by stamping some of the Regal Flora. We're going to use some of the florals in here and the greenery. So let's get started with that. I'm going to be using 4 different colors. I'm going to be using the Granny Apple Green, Daffodil Delight, Shaded Spruce, and Blueberry Bushel for the stamping. And so I've got my stamps loaded up here on blocks. Let's start with, oh, I don't have one of them on a block. The largest one. I was going to say let's start with the largest one, but it's still in the folder because I put a different stamp on the block. So let's take this other stamp off. That's our sentiment. We'll be using that later. Let's load up our block with our largest stamp. And I'm going to grab my little sticky note pad here because I want to do some second generation stamping. So we're going to do this with the Blueberry Bushel. So I'm going to ink up my stamp in Blueberry Bushel, and then I'm going to stamp once on my sticky note and then once on my paper. And what that does is it gives me a little bit lighter color. And yes, I have stamped on my sticky note, but I can use the sticky note later. I can just write right over top of where I stamped. It's not a problem, okay? So don't ever worry about that. You can use the sticky note. It's just going to look prettier. All right, now the next thing I want to do is stamp one of the single flowers. Let's do that in some Daffodil Delight. I've got the Stampin' spots for this one and the Granny Apple Green because I don't have the full-size inks yet. You have to kind of pick and choose when you're doing inks. Let's maybe stamp 2 of these because you can't always buy everything all at once, so you use what you have, right? And I was actually gifted a bunch of these from a friend, and that was super kind of her, so I'm enjoying using them. All right, next we'll use the Granny Apple Green, and we're going to use this little cluster of leaves, a little bit of foliage. We're going to stamp that up in the Granny Apple Green. Ink, 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 ink. There we go. And we're going to stamp it on down there. Yeah, let's do 2 of those. Why not? The more the merrier. We're going to make a little cluster with these flowers, so it doesn't hurt to have a few to choose from. And then our last one we're going to stamp here is this cluster of leaves, and we're going to use the shaded spruce. Now these are all colors that coordinate with the Full of Life paper collection. And the Full of Life collection is a 6x6 collection. But don't let that distract you. They're gorgeous and you can do a lot with them. I've used them on layouts, and I've used them on cards, and I've used them for other projects. So it's all good. Okay, now that we have done our stamping, we can go ahead and cut these out. There's a good chance that there's a die set that goes with these, but I just bought the stamp set. So all we're going to do our fussy cutting is we're going to just cut around the outside. We're going to leave a halo around of the white paper in behind, and we're going to pivot our paper as we cut, because that just helps everything move along quickly and smoothly. And there we go. We've cut out our first flower. Now, the magic of Facebook means that I have already cut out these ahead of time. So you don't need to sit here and watch me cut them all again. You see me do a lot of fussy cutting. So I'm just going to set that aside for now. And then I want to bring in the Stampin' Cut embossing folder. This is the modern Herringbone 3D embossing folder. It's a little bit smaller than some of the ones that we've been using lately. This one is about 4.5 by 6 inches, which means it makes a lovely card front. And I decided, instead of putting cardstock in here, I would use some of this gorgeous pattern paper, the designer series paper from the Full of Life collection. And I love this gradient. This is kind of sort of the backside of a more stylized design, but I love this gradient. It's super pretty. And because this herringbone reminds me of knitting, I thought it would be kind of fun, because you can buy yarns that are gradient yarns that just kind of go from one color to the next without you having to switch colors. That's just how they come. And so I thought we could stick that in there and do some of this modern herringbone embossing. So when you run an embossing folder through your machine, it's actually squashing it, isn't it? We're just running it through. Gonna make my sandwich. And that's how the embossing folder works. It's got a front side and a back side, a relief, and what's the opposite of relief? One side's the relief and one side's the impression, I guess. And so we just run it through, and you can run any kind of paper through here. Vellum looks pretty embossed. Foil paper can be embossed. So we can absolutely emboss designer series paper. Let's move our machine out of the way. And then we can take a look at what happened with our Full of Life DSP. And this piece was cut to 4 inches by 5.25, so a little bit less than a card front. And look at that gorgeous texture that we have created by squashing our embossing folder and creating this really cool design. And it feels very cool. It's very rounded and ridgy, and it's just gorgeous. I love it. So that is our embossing folder done. Let's bring in our card base. I've just got a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card base. So that's a 8 1/2 by 5 1/2. Scored in the center at 4 1/4. We're going to fold it with the bump side to the inside. This is just basic white cardstock. And we're going to squish this down. Lots of squishing happening in this project. And then this is going to get applied to the front. But I want to jazz it up a little bit. So I'm adding an extra layer in there. And the extra layer that I'm going to add is a piece of black cardstock, just basic black. And it's been cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So it'll just be a nice little rim of black around our embossed piece of Designer Series paper. So we're going to go quickly, grab my Take Your Pick tool. We're going to take the backings off this. And we will center it on the front of our card using our fingertips to help guide us. It's going to leave a nice little rim of the white still showing. And then we can add on our embossed piece. Now, because I don't want to push too hard on our embossed piece, I'm going to apply my adhesive to the black cardstock that's already been attached. Just come in from the edge a little bit. Like so. And then we can stick this down. Again, using our fingertips to help guide placement. And there we go. We're just being nice and gentle with that. But it feels so nice. It almost feels like you want to, like, you know those pop-it things with the little circles? It feels like you want to go pop, 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 pop to all these little sections that are embossed on there, because that's just what they feel like. You could pop them. But we're not going to do that. All right. So along with my little yellow flower here, I also have another one. And then I have the blueberry bushel ones. I've got my shaded spruce leaves and my granny apple green leaves, just like we stamped at the beginning, but they've already been fussy cut. And as well as that, I want to bring in a circle of Pretty in Pink. And this has been cut using this Stylish Shapes dies. And I used the 3rd size up from the center, which is almost, well, it's about 1 5/8. So it's almost 1 3/4 inch circle. And I'm going to add my sentiment onto this circle. And I'm using the sentiment from this Sharing, Loving, Crafting stamp set. And it's the one that says, just to brighten your day. So I'm going to just do a little switcheroo here. Take that stamp off and put this stamp on. And I'm going to ink this up just using black ink, because we're kind of pulling in that black from our little border that we've started building there. And that will kind of tone down some of the sweetness in the colors when you've got a lot of pink and other bright colors going on. A little bit of black doesn't hurt, just to kind of give some balance to it. So there we go. I love how it kind of works with that circular shape. All right. And we're going to add some dimensionals on the back of this. Let me just grab those. Stick maybe 3 of them on there will be good. Like so. Now I'm not going to remove the backings yet, because I don't want to stick it down just yet, because I want to kind of work on my cluster. We've been doing clustering off and on for a few years now, but I always like to sort of do a dry run of clustering before we commit to anything. And so that includes sticking down the sentiment. So on this card, we're going to kind of work our way around in a circle. So we're going to start with one of these. And we're just going to kind of see where they all land. Maybe a little spruce leafy goodness as well to put some height on this. And then, okay, let's get some florals in. So we've got our Daffodil Delight. And then down in our corner, we can add our Granny Apple Green. We can even shift it down a little bit, I think. This is why we do a dry run, right? So we're just kind of building our way around. And then how about another floral and some more leafy goodness, because it's kind of on the opposite side from where we did the other one. And then our blueberry bushel florals can kind of get tucked in there. And that's kind of roughly what we're going to do with our cluster. And I think that looks pretty good. I think I like where it landed on the card. I know in the video it looks a little bit squished. That's just how it is. Hi, Mom. Nice to see you're watching. So let's go ahead. Let's start with our little Granny Apple Green. We're going to add a little bit of adhesive to this. And that's the good thing about not sticking anything down yet. We can just tuck things under just the way they are. This one's going to need some liquid glue. It's a little narrow for the tape. And we'll just tuck that under there like so. Grab the next one. Put some tape on it. And I don't like to put adhesive all the way to the edges of my embellishments, because as you can see from this green one, there's a lot of lift that's happening, and that kind of adds dimension without having to add any dimensionals. So I think you might as well take advantage of that and let it do its thing, right? And our next little bunch of leaves, tucking them in. Now don't worry, we are doing something more than just this. Sometimes I think people get worried, oh, she's just sticking stuff on there. But we're going to have a little surprise inside on this card. But we want to get the front done first. All right, I'm going to just pull that one out of the way for now so I don't stick it right on there. There we go. And I'm going to pull this guy out too, because I'm going in with some glue again, and I'm be sure to glue it to the wrong thing. So we're going to tuck that in there. I think it's really fun when you're creating around a sentiment like this. It's already a round sentiment, so you've got that feeling of things kind of encircling. So then to have the stamped images kind of circling around just kind of highlights that feeling. And there we go. We can just tuck that under there. Now we can, of course, take our backings off like so. And always one of these steps, I always have to bring in the tweezers because I need to see where I'm going. Make sure I'm getting it in there right, putting it in there straight. There we go. Just to brighten your day. Isn't that a great reason to get some happy mail? Because it's just to brighten your day. Now we're going to need to add some bling to this as well. Let me find where I set my bling down. There it is. So I'm going to be using the Adhesive-backed Sparkle Gems for this. And I'm going to use the black ones because remember I said we were bringing in some black just to kind of give it a little add a little darkness into its life. So we're going to stick one there. That's one of the bigger ones. And then we're going to come up here and add a couple more, make a little trio of bling around our embellishment cluster. Doesn't that look pretty with that sort of knitted texture from the embossing folder in behind? And it's also got the gradient. Now you could create a gradient like that. You could do some ink blending on paper if you wanted, but it was already done for me in that Full of Life collection. So that was super easy. Now to go to the inside, I'm going to set this aside for a minute because we're going to bring in another piece of the Full of Life collection. It's this one, this 6x6 big starbursty bit of goodness that's going on here. And what I want to do with this is a wee bit of scoring to create what I want to create. So I'm going to bring in my Simply scoreboard. Going to pop this in the corner like this. And then with my scoring tool gently, because this is designer series paper, it's not cardstock, we're going to score it in the middle at 6 inches. Doesn't matter which direction. 6 inches. And then we're going to turn it 90 degrees and we're going to score it in the center again. Did I say 6 inches? I meant 3 inches. Half of 6 is 3. So we're scoring this way at 3 inches as well. And then I also want to make a diagonal. And the way to do a diagonal with a scoreboard is I have taken a Sharpie marker, and at the 6-inch line here, I just put my Sharpie marker in this groove at the 6-inch line, and I drew with the marker. So now when I lay my paper on here, I can see that I'm in the 6-inch groove because that's where the line is going. So I know that when I start up at this point at the 6-inch line, it's going to travel all the way down here and end up at that point at the 6-inch line. Now you want to be careful when you're going to a point. You notice how when I started here, I started in from the edge and then I went out to the point. And if you push into a point, it's a bit like a paper trimmer. If you push into a point, you're more likely going to rumple the point. So we don't want to do that. Alrighty. So now for our score lines, we need to do some creasing. We're going to do our vertical and horizontal ones first, and we're going to fold those. Now this is a little bit backwards from what we normally do. Normally we say with the bump side to the inside, but we're actually going to do with the pattern to itself. I could have flipped it over and scored it from the back side, but I didn't. And so we're just doing it this way. That's just how it's going to be. And then we can make sure everything lines up, crease it down. Then we're going to open it up. And we're going to crease it on the horizontal line that we scored. There we go. Oops, crease that down. And then we have the diagonal line, and the diagonal line is going to be done properly. We're going to fold it with the bump side to the inside, so we need to fold it backwards on itself. And if you just kind of roll it, it'll pop to where that crease line is. Make sure everything lines up. And then from the center out, always creasing from the center out so that everything doesn't shift. Sometimes if you start creasing from one side to the other, the whole thing will do some kind of shift like this as you're going across. You don't want that. Okay, turn it back to this side and we can do a little pop in the center, and you see how everything just kind of pops one way or the other. It even makes a satisfying sound. I hope you can hear that. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to put our fingers on these two diagonals, and we're going to push them towards each other, and that's going to make this whole thing squish down into a little diamond shape, or a square if I turn it. So let's show that again. The two points that are on either end of the diagonal fold, we're going to push those to the center, and then we're going to squash everything down. All right, and then we're going to come in and crease. Now this mechanism, I don't know if you heard me say it just a second ago, is a squash fold. And so if you put this on the inside of your card and then you open your card, you're going to get this boing, ba-boing. And so you're going to have that sort of explosion. So it's a squash and an explode all at the same time. So let's bring in our card base. And what we want to do is we want to do a little bit of a measurement here. So I'm going to line up on one of my horizontal lines. I think I'm still on the screen. Grab my ruler, and I want to measure the very center of this center line here. So we have 5.5 inches, which is going to give us 2 3/4. So 1, 2 3/4 from the bottom or from the top, doesn't matter which. And pencil. Pencil would be handy. We're just going to make a little line right there so that we know that's the center. And that's going to help us with the placement of our squash mechanism. Let's add some adhesive to this. And we're going to add adhesive on both sides. Just a couple strips. This one there. And one there. And then we're going to flip it over. Doesn't matter which of the sides on these squares. Just put a couple strips on. It's all good. It'll hold it down. It's not a high stress mechanism. If you want, you could add more. It's not necessary. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the backing off one of the sides, just one to begin. Don't worry, we'll get to the other one. And now you want to look at your, I'm going to put the adhesive removed side on this side. So you want to look at your thing and say, yes, that looks like what I want. We're going to close it up, although actually I kind of want it going this way. I want this at the top and this at the bottom. So I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to go to the left side first. So I've got my lighter side up at the top. I'm going to fold it, and I'm going to make sure I'm lined up with the lines on my mat, because I'm going to put this point, the one that's the center, right? We've got our solid square here. Our two diagonals are at the top and the bottom. This very center point is going to go there. And then the other side is going to point to 2 3/4. Like so. And you're going to stick it down. That's all you're going to do. And then all you need to do is to peel off the backing on this side. Like so. And then you're going to close the back of your card. It's super simple. So if you are somebody who joins us for a 30-minute card making stash dash on Tuesday nights, and we have a surprise inside card, this is something that you might want to consider a squash card. It's sometimes called an explosion, sometimes called a squash. But since we were squashing to emboss, I figured we'd squash our inside, and ta-da! See how it just pops right out, easy peasy, makes it even bigger than our card. And we still need a spot to write our message or add a stamped sentiment on the inside. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a piece of basic white that's 2 3/4 inch square. We're going to add some adhesive on the back. I'm not stamping a sentiment. I'm going to leave it blank. And that way I can just hand write whatever I want for my message when the time comes. Now, there was something else that I was going to do to this card that I should have done before I did all the things that I just did. And that was I was going to stamp on the back side. If you kind of tip up the front of your card, you can kind of center this because you can see the creases a little easier when it's tipped up like that. But that's all we need to do. And then on the back of the card, let me see if I can maybe do it. You know what? I don't think it's going to work very well. But what I wanted to do, I'll show you on the other card that I made, is I wanted to stamp from this Sharing, Loving, Crafting stamp set, the Handcrafted By stamp, and then you can just sign your name. How fun is that? And but that's good to do before you put too many things, because there's a gem right there. and that's going to affect how it stamps. I could stamp on a separate piece of paper and attach it now if I wanted to, but I'm just going to leave it for now. But there we go. We have completed our emboss and squash card. And so we started out with our basic white cardstock base. We added on our layer of black cardstock to tone down the sweet. But I love the bright colors in this Full of Life designer series paper and how we picked them up and added them in with all the stamped Regal Flora, the beautiful herringbone 3D embossing, and then we also added in those lovely glitter gems on there, or sparkle gems, and then that one other piece of 6x6 DSP to create our little explosion squash mechanism in the center, just for some fun, because this card was just to brighten your day, no other reason than a little bit of fun, and I think it's super cute. So I hope you enjoyed seeing that come together, seeing the embossing folders and the stamp sets and the designer series paper, and I hope you feel inspired to create a card like this for yourself. And if you do, be sure to snap a photo of it, pop it in the comments where I post my photo, and then we can all see and be inspired by your artwork as well. All right, I hope you have a great rest of your evening. We'll be on at 7 o'clock for Chat and Craft. Hope to see you then. All right, toodaloo, bye.